Hey, what's going on, ISM family? We've got another Tuesday talk for you this Tuesday.
Yeah.
Today we are joined by Pastor Zack Green. He is the youth pastor, student director slash campus, one of the campus pastors at Summit Park Church in Kansas City, right? Kansas City area.
Yep. Lee Summit specifically.
Lee Summit, right? And so he was one of the youth pastors whenever I was an intern. So we've seen Adam Olson, who was an intern with me. We've seen Joe Banks, who was one of my youth leaders when I was a student, and now we have one of the youth pastors that I had the privilege and honor of interning and serving alongside at James River. Zach, thanks so much for being on this Zoom call with us for this Tuesday talk.
Yeah, man. Honestly, honored to be here with you. And I just want to say to everybody watching, you guys are blessed by Dr. Bell is what we called him. And seriously, you're not going to find somebody who is more passionate about God's word and discipling people. And so honored to be here with you today.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much for those kind words. Just kind of open things up. What's been, we're nearing the end of this, stay home order for you guys. We're in this, things are getting back to normal, hopefully, or whatever normal looks like now. What are some things, during this time of you being, in stay home and working from home and all those things, how have you seen, or how have you grown in your walk with God through this time? But even how have you seen God move in and through your church and through your students?
Yeah. You mentioned the word normal, and I think we're all coming to grips with the reality of a new normal. And there's been a new normal with quarantine. And so your routine for day-to-day activities, there's a new normal. For work, there's a new normal. And for scheduling, for eating, you eat at home a lot more. There's a new normal. I think it allows you to process moving forward after this season, what is going to be a new normal. And so anybody in leadership, although you hate to see the sickness and the death and really the pandemic that has swept the nation and the world, you hate that. As a leader, Louis Giglio says, leaders are chomping at the bit, seeing what we can learn from this season and how we can move forward.
Yeah.
And so, you look at the new normal for what is the new normal for life going to be? What is the new normal for ministry going to be? What's the new normal for my family going to be? And as a leader, if you haven't thought those things through on day 2 of quarantine, right, then you're behind. And I feel like we all probably feel in some way or another that we are behind, right, in some area.
Yeah.
And so what I've really come to grips with is there is a new normal, and there in terms of how we're responding to COVID, and there is a proactive approach to what will our new normal be. And that's really what's been keeping me up at night. And it's filled meetings, as I'm sure it has for you too. What is going to be the new normal? Obviously, some of that is dictated by the stay-at-home orders, the regulation, the social distancing cues that are being given by the CDC. All of those things, there will be some things that's just unknown, and we're going to have to react in the moment. But there are some things that we do know for sure. And one of those things is the game has changed. It is now changed forever. The game has changed for school. The game has changed for community, for friendship, for family. And the game has certainly changed for ministry. Every church had some sort of strategy for technology, for putting content out, for connecting with people online. And this whole season has made every single church, every single person evaluate what in the world is our strategy going to be. And no matter where you're at, you probably felt like, man, I'm behind. And then, as you're taking that and you're applying it to every other area of life, I think it's really important that we take a moment to look at that and to say, what is our new normal going to be? And so just as we've been processing that, my wife and I, at home, everybody has gotten a lot closer. And that means the good and the bad. So it's the good because there's just this sweet, you're just always together, like they're always there. So it's just this really unique season that we'll never have again, to where we're spending really months of 23 hours a day, maybe 23 and a half, 24 hours a day. You're just together. So there's the good that comes from that, but there's also what we call intense fellowship that comes out of that.
Yeah.
I think it was like every other day, the first week, every other day, there was some intense fellowship, because you're just not used to being, even if it's your spouse, if it's your family, you're not used to being together all the time.
Yeah.
And so what can we learn? What can we learn from this season to apply to the next season for what is going to be our new normal? So some takeaways from me is just for our family, man, we're going to be taking this cue of eating at home. We have eaten all of our meals at home. Now, some of those are DoorDash, right, meals, but we've eaten all of our meals at home. So we're taking this practice and we're saying there is such a benefit from eating together around the table with no distractions. And, we knew that used to be a norm when we were growing up in the 90s, early 2000s, but then slowly, really culture took that away from a normality. And there's a benefit from taking some of that and applying it to your next season to make it a new normal. Also, I have spent so much more time with the Lord during this season, because what else do you have to do, right? Like it's like go watch Tiger King or pray for a little bit longer. And I'm sure that we've all fallen subject to the Netflix binge and Disney Plus, whatever your flavor is. But there are some principles that we can learn during the season that have been forced on us, that now we can take a proactive approach and not be so busy when we move into the next season.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good to make sure that we're learning something from this. It's not us sitting there and saying, okay, we're back to the way it was. It's like, no, this has changed everything for church. Even that understanding of, it's not about a check-in, check-out, church service. Okay, I'm a Christian. I punch the card in on Sundays, punch the card in on Wednesday nights.
Right.
And I'm good. It's now becoming one of those where it's like, no, Jesus is a lifestyle. Like this whole thing is like, this is really created an opportunity for us to see where we're lacking, in community or in our own lives as we walk with God, to sit there and say, hey, look, like it's not about us being together all the time or us having an event or whatever that looks like. It's about us being the church, the community of God together. And so that's really awesome. What are some things that, you guys have been doing as your church or whatever to stay connected with your students? You were talking about, I just make a bunch of phone calls, different things like that. But what are some things that you've guys have been doing with your students? And then what are some things, as far as what do you feel like God has been doing in your students and through your students during this time?
Yeah. Well, I think that the age range of middle school to high school is the hardest to connect to during this season, which is really interesting. You would think it would be the other way around. You would think that that would be the easiest. So in terms of our church, it's been the hardest to connect to, because there's this, they're on Zoom calls for school. So, they don't like Zoom calls. And I think all of us are getting a little sick and tired of Zoom calls, right? Mm-hmm. It's just become a part of it. But then, the teenagers are viewing text messages like emails, like we view emails, to where they'll let 124 unread text messages pile up. And so if you're not somebody who uses Snapchat, it is really difficult to communicate with students. So I and our leaders have leaned into the uncomfortable technology that you just need to download and get yourself affiliated with, like Marco Polo or House Party, even going Instagram Live, and understanding that if youth ministry has always been about us going to where they are, right? Obviously inviting them to where we are. So inviting them to services, inviting them to life groups over Zoom calls, inviting them to come. But it's really, if you're really chasing them, you really care about them. And if ministry really does flow through relationships, and relationships take time, thank you, Scotty Gibbons, for that quote, then it actually requires us to go where they are. So, we have completely changed our structure of services to where, when we have a service for students, it is on Instagram Live. And so we've got our announcements on Instagram Live, our game on Instagram Live, and then our message. We even had, our DYD come in, and he was a guest speaker last month for that service. And we do a salvation altar call, and people are making decisions. And then we even do worship. So on Instagram Live, we're hosting it from our account, and whatever segment it is, I'll pull in whoever is hosting that segment, and I'll kind of let them take over from there. And that's been the best way for us that we've seen engagement. Could we record a service? Of course we could. We could record worship and a sermon and do different segments, but the engagement level would not be as much as where they already are on a Wednesday night at 6:30, 7 p.m. That's Instagram. And so is there a way for us to broadcast to where there's going to be engagement? Now, there's an understanding that if you're on Instagram, you're going to pop in and pop out as you please, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's non-committal. I can do what I want. There's an understanding. And so with this season, there's been things that we've just had to say, okay, I'm going to lay down my opinion, and I'm going to lay down that aspect. I'm going to trade that for engagement. Because at the end of the day, he who engages people during this season wins. And so we've just been thinking about what is going to engage our students. Certainly, if there's ever a birthday party, we're organizing a parade, and we're driving by, we're honking and throwing cards at their front yard and things of that nature. Certainly, there are the personal text messages, phone calls. There's something that we've been doing with voice recordings or voice memos, or even on text message. You can, just record a voice and send it over. We've been doing prayers that way. We've been doing just quick check-ins that way. But any way that we can engage on one of 8 fronts, we view as a win. If you can engage on 3 of those 8 fronts, that's even more of a win. But you're at least getting one sense of engagement and leaning into the season.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what are some things, how have you seen your students grow during this season of trying to engage them and get them in to that? Sure. Have you seen some students grow? Maybe it's those outlier students that you were trying so hard to get engaged in the youth or whatever that looks like, and now all of a sudden they're engaged, and then there's that, or it's maybe it's your student leaders that have grown more and more and more. How have you seen students grow?
There's been students who haven't attended the group in 2 years, but because we did an Instagram Live and they're a follower, they would hop on, or because we're sharing it, different leaders that they're still connected with their students will share it and they'll hop on. And so that's engagement. And so we're seeing people who have fallen off the tracks being engaged, and it gives us an opportunity to follow up with them. So we have a leader huddle before our services, and their goal is interaction throughout the service, but also to find names, and they're writing down names during service. Afterwards, they're following up with that person 2 to 3 times in the next week. And so you're seeing engagement like never before because it's just easy. It's right there. It's immediate, right? But also I'll just be honest with you, there's a real challenge because of that, because it's so easy to be disengaged. I have been ghosted by students that I never thought would ghost me in my life. And you'll look at the text message stream, right? I could pull it up and you'll see 5 text messages from me in the past 2 weeks. And it is literally radio silence on the other end. So there's a challenge there. Yeah. And I think that we have to understand that. And so it's required us to think about it differently. And so I started a life group right before, an additional life group right before quarantine happened. And it was called Chick-fil Life Group. And we just went to Chick-fil-A and we read the Bible. That's the whole thing. That's the whole group. It's the whole point of the group is literally just going and finding a table. Whoever wants to come is welcome. And we just eat chicken nuggets and read the Bible together. So during the quarantine, we've kept that consistent meeting going with each other, whether it's over FaceTime or over Zoom, whichever they want to do. And what we're doing is for 2 weeks at a time, we're breaking down a chapter. So whether that be Romans 12, James 1, Romans 8 is what we're in right now. And we're just doing a deep dive into God's word. And so to your question about, how some students grown, it's given us the opportunity to do Bible study, like a real Bible study. We've always encouraged students to study their Bible. And, we've always even talked about in our discussions, in life group discussions, what are we doing to really dive into God's word? But this season has allowed us to say, you know what, let's not do sermon-based discussions. Let's just read the Bible together.
Yeah.
And so we have changed our structure to not be student, message, sermon, discussion to let's discuss the message on the weekends because we're all in this together with families, but then let's read the Bible together. And there is no single thing better to do as a youth pastor than read your Bible with students. Mm-hmm. And, there's not an ability to go on the campus right now. And so if we can engage them and if we can read the Bible with them, man, that we're doing our job.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. So kind of just want to kind of wrap up with a few last questions here. But what are some things that for you, you're really looking forward to or just expecting, for God to do? Because I think a lot of times, we can be in this moment of just we're busy. Like that's just what it is. Like we have a lot of stuff on our plate as pastors. Sometimes a lot of pastors, their plates have been more so full just because of the nature of where we're at. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what's happening, in 2 weeks or whatever that looks like. The world could look completely different in 2 weeks than it does right now, with as far as like stay home, quarantine, different things like that. So what are some things that you're expecting God to do or expecting, God to move after all this? So once we're back and, able to have full services and with students and all those things, what are some, expectations that you have, or maybe expectations is the wrong word, but maybe just living life and, with the faith that God's going to do something big. Cause I think God's going to do something big in Cleveland where I'm at. But what are some things, for you that you're like, man, I think God's going to do this, or is there anything that you're like, man, I'm expecting God to do these things?
So, going back to what we had originally talked about with the new normal, I think it's requiring us to, as leaders, think about how can we do what we do better, and how can we lean into technology and take some of the practices and principles that we're taking right now, that we're doing right now, and apply them to the future, and I'm faith-filled, anticipating and believing that there are things that are going to be put in place from churches in this season that is going to set us up, the Big C Church, to preach the whole gospel to the whole world. Matthew 24:14 talks about this gospel of the kingdom will be preached to the whole world, and then the end will come. And I'm like, this season is setting us up to be able to preach the gospel to the whole world. I mean, you just look at metrics of the church, whether you want to look at churches who are leading the way, like Life Church, all the way to churches that are hosting a Facebook Live on the weekends, and that's their only online presence, right? You look at, and everything in between, the engagement of the gospel that's being sent out. And because Facebook, the algorithm, if it gets liked and it gets shared more and more, then Facebook will bless you and will give you even more influence, right? So there are some churches that are getting thousands, hundreds of thousands of views where the good news of Jesus is being proclaimed. What if we took what we're learning right now and applied it to every single week when we're out of quarantine? When COVID's done, it's going to give us the opportunity to preach the gospel of the kingdom to the whole world. What are we doing? We're fulfilling the Great Commission in a way that we never thought possible. So I think it's going to require us to think differently. But I think when we think differently about this, the whole gospel of the kingdom is going to be preached, and we are going to be fulfilling the Great Commission. It's not going to be in the way that we thought. A lot of us are still doing church like we did it in the early 2000s. And we're making tweaks, right? We're making tweaks to orders of service. We're making tweaks to style of worship. We're making tweaks to stage design, but it's been minor tweaks. And I think this is an awakening for us. It would be the word that I would use to make major adjustments to a major need for people to hear the gospel. Yeah. If we really say our goal is that the whole world would hear the gospel of the kingdom, Jesus said it. If that's the goal for us to do that, then the changes that we're making now are going to contribute to that being a reality. That's exciting. So does that mean that we're closer to end times than ever before? Everybody's got their opinion, right? Nobody's going to know the day. Nobody's going to know the hour. But I do know this. We're being set up, this generation of pastors and leaders and the marketplace, right? Right now, the marketplace, people who are parishioners, people who attend the church, members of the church, have more influence than ever before because they're using their own platforms.
Yeah.
And they're taking the gospel places we could never take it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we lean into that, I'm excited to see what the Lord does in and through it.
Man, that's really good, man. You're starting to preach, man. I just
I know,
you down. You know?
It's tough because we're not preaching right now, right?
Right. Yeah.
So.
But that's the thing is like when we're passionate about that, you know, that's so cool to sit there and say, man, God's going to use all of this as a paradigm shift or whatever that looks like. You know, it's one of those things where sometimes the packaging looks different, you know, kind of in the way that things happen. And so just having that, you know, if God wanted to give you something, but it was in a different package, would you take it? You know,
yes.
and at the moment now we're sitting here looking at that as saying, okay, what does evangelizing the world look like? Maybe it's in a different package than what we think it should be in.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, it is, missionaries are so important, you know, having, you know, giving to Speed the Light, all that stuff. I'm Speed Light coordinator. So, you know, give Speed the Light, all that stuff. But at the same time, for us to look at it and package it in a different way as well, to sit there and say, hey, how can we be more effective in partnering with missionaries? How can we be more effective in reaching everybody, the whole, I mean, internet, you can get internet pretty much anywhere, you know, and just having that understanding of having an online presence as your church isn't just so that you can get all a bunch of views. Like if you understand what the views are, you know, when we understand the views are actually people hearing the gospel, hearing about Jesus, instead of just our own, you know, vanity, popularity, be like, oh, I got so many views. It's like, but those are people that hear about God, you know, and that's so important always for us to look at. And so that's such a good word to sit there and say, you know, this is something that God is retraining or reshaping or opening the church's eyes to set up us to continue to be more effective and to continue by the power of the Holy Spirit to reach people for the gospel in ways that we didn't even think of before, because we weren't in this situation where we can't communicate, period, physically on a one-on-one basis. So that's so good. That's awesome. What is one thing? So students right now that are at home or that are, you know, starting to go back, you know, especially, you know, you look at like my brother's Gibson's a senior. And so he's graduating, but he had to push back, graduation got pushed back until August, you know, just different things like that. What's one challenge or word of encouragement that you'd give to students right now going through this time that maybe just bored? Like at this point, you know, we've been in this 1-2 months, you know, we're past the fear, you know, kind of side of things, or past this, you know, at least most students are, you know, so students that are just, you know, bored, like ready, like going stir crazy, ready to do something else, you know, what's one challenge or a word of encouragement for them that you would have?
Yeah. I would encourage every student with this, no matter what age you are, especially the seniors though. Right now is an investment. So this season that you're in right now, it's an investment. So if you want to correlate that to financial investment right now, if your time, what you're spending your time on, if you're investing that and you want to put a dollar amount to it, what are you investing for your future? If you're spending your time, and I get it, because I'm in it too. There's this funk that you wake up, and especially if you don't have a job that day, like if you're not working that day, you wake up, and what is the tendency? It's to open up your phone, scroll Instagram, or turn on the TV and scroll Netflix or whatever streaming service that you have. That's the tendency, and it's to stay up late gaming. It's the tendency. It's the go-to for us. But if you want to view this season like an investment, what is your next season going to look like because of the investment that you put in right now? So if you want to put a dollar amount to it, man, if I were to put $1 worth of investment into this season, if I get a 50% return in the next season, now I only have $1.50, right? What if you put $1,000? What if you put $5,000 into this season? You got the same return. Think of how much further along you're going to be in your journey of faith, in your walk with God, in your spiritual maturity, or even practically speaking, get a job online, right? Do something that you can make money. Read a book.
Yeah.
For the love of Jesus, read a book, and invest in yourself. Obviously, diet and exercise are really important, but right now is an opportunity for investment that you'll never get again. So if you're finding yourself bored, man, let that be a reminder to yourself. Just wake yourself up out of it and say, how can I invest my time right now? How can I invest my energy right now? There is a season right now that you will never get again, and it is a gift. It's a gift from the Lord. It's hard for us to view it that way, but it's a gift. And if you invest it the right way, God's going to honor it, and he's going to return it in your next season.
Yeah, that's so good. That's great. And even, you look at it and see, master classes are going for like, buy one, get one, like full year, different things like that's they're capitalizing on that understanding of investing in yourself in this time, learning how to do different things, learning more stuff, reading a book, right? Different things.
Right.
That's so good. And then finally, just kind of on a lighter note question, once all this is over, what's one thing or one place, maybe it's a food place, you're like, I want to really go to this joint and sit down and have a good meal, whatever that is. What's one thing you're looking forward to the most at the end of all this, when you're able to be, when you're free, what's one thing, what's one place, one thing that you're going to do whenever you're out?
Okay, it's going to be a date night for sure. And we're going to go to this local spot in Lee Summit, downtown Lee Summit, called 3rd Street Social. And it is, the best way to describe this is bougie comfort food. Okay. So they've got the atmosphere, they've got the feng shui, they've got the subway tile and the Edison bulbs, they've got it all. But it's like Nashville hot fried chicken that is unbelievable. So I'm gonna get some Nashville hot fried chicken. They've got smoked Gouda, mac and cheese. Ooh. And they have these French fries that are so crispy on the outside and so fluffy on the inside. And so I'm gonna go to Pound Town at 3rd Street Social, and then obviously we're gonna go to Andy's Frozen Custard afterwards. Yeah. And then there is a local spot called Nothing Bundt Cakes. And it's a bundt cake shop, and we're just gonna get a whole bundt cake.
Man, you're making me want to come to Lee Summit now. Like I'm
hey, you gotta come. Hey, if you come, I will treat you to 3rd Street Social. Hey, you'll see. You'll taste and see that the Lord is good.
All right, sounds good. Well, Zack, thank you so much again for being on this Tuesday talk. It's been a pleasure talking to you, seeing you again. It has been too long for us to talk. But thank you so much for doing this for our students and anybody else who may be watching. So much.
Love you, Galen.
Thank you so much. Thank you on that. But students, this has been it. This is the Tuesday talk, another one in the books. I say that every week, right? Another Tuesday talk in the books. But tune in next week for another Tuesday talk. We love you so much. I'm praying for you daily, what God's going to be doing and God is doing in your life. Please, please, please take what has been talked about and really learn to invest in where you're at. Maybe that's the question. Takeaway question for you today is what are you investing in during this time? Whether that's, hey, the world's back to normal. What are you investing in? How are you investing? Just because the world may be back and everything may be open doesn't mean that we stop investing. So what are some things you're investing in? But don't forget, this Thursday night, 7:00, we're doing our Devo still. So we'll see you guys there. Love you so much. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Peace.